I know you've heard it before. It's one of the hardest shows, if you haven't seen it, to explain. Is that on purpose?
No, I don't think it's on purpose. I just think it's a show that's very detailed, and you have to be fully invested while you're watching it. Like, you can't be on Twitter, you can't be on your phone, you can't be on Instagram. You have to be completely invested in it. And I think once people go back and watch it from the beginning, everything will make sense, because there's Easter eggs throughout every episode that all connect. But it is crazy.
Okay, give us one Easter egg. It is, I mean, there's like there's the Wiz. Like, I've seen everything that I grew up loving, and I hate horror, in this space. Okay, so let's back up. How did you become the writer for this? Because I know you've written on other things before, and I saw you did a screenshot of Misha Green kind of inviting you to the writer's room.
It was interesting because I was offered a writer assistant position. So this was my first time ever breaking into TV at all. And so it was a great opportunity for me. And I was very nervous about it because I felt the impact this show was going to have. And working under someone like Misha Green, who's a visionary, a creative force, it just opened me up in new ways. So I started off as a writer assistant, which was very, very difficult. I had long hours. I was like working till like 2 a.m. every day, and then being back at work at like 9 a.m. Because it was just a detailed, intense process to create this show. And then, you know, I think my hard work and my writing ability, Misha saw something in me, and she gave me an opportunity to co-write episode 8 with her, which was the Wiggle Bobo episode and the Emmett Till episode. And then I got another opportunity to help break the season finale. So the season finale, I got a story by credit that I share with Misha. So it's been a long, crazy, unexpected journey to be at this place.
All right, Easter egg that was in the first episode that came full circle in the last episode that we might have missed. Give us one.
In the first episode, they came full circle in the last episode. Ooh, that's a hard one to go back and think about. I mean,
okay,
give us. I could think about. I'll give you one. Like, for instance, like that opening sequence in the pilot episode where the Jackie Robinson of it all, who's smashing the monsters. That was an Easter egg or a foreshadowing for episode 9 when Atticus was Jackie Robinson, who saved his uncle and his father from the racist white people in Tulsa. So that was kind of like a foreshadowing that I think once people saw that, it was people's mind was just blown up like, oh, wow, this show is a totally different level than we expected. Like, we didn't just like, I think people thought it was confusing because we didn't explain everything. We allowed for the season to grow, for things to make sense instead of just like force feeding people.
So is George the dark skinned version of the multi-eyed creature that actually loves Tick and that is right next to Diana? Because we never saw George's body. They never got George's body, and all the other people who got injured by the multi-eyed creature in that episode were all, their bodies were all transformed into multi-eyed creatures. The dark-skinned multi-eyed creature is the only one that we see that comes and engages Tick and is like, right, and saves Diana. Is that George?
I would have to say I love everybody's series. I mean, some of you guys' series are like better than what we could have thought of. I just feel like these are so interesting. Like, that's
she's cagey. She's cagey, Drew. I think you onto something, Drew. I think you're onto something, Drew. I think you are onto something because I didn't see that one. Okay, let me write that down. Have you been greenlit for season 2?
I can't answer that. I will hope that we are renewed, but right now, we're just waiting to see what happens.
Okay. All right. What's the African influence? So Ruby's African, right? She's an African person playing this character who is my favorite character, by the way. I can't stand Tick, so I was not really mourning last night too much. I was like, he could go. I mean, full disclosure, I've been consistent with that. He's not my favorite character. Ruby was my favorite character, so I was sad, and what influence did you bring from the motherland into your writing?
I think this show deals heavily with ancestry and your ancestral bloodline, and how important that is to who you are as a person, and connecting to your ancestry and connecting to those who actually had the magic but was stolen from them. So there's a lot of African mythology. There's a lot of African references, especially when they do go to the ancestral plane with, Hannah and Dora. All of that ties in a lot to African mythology. And we did a whole mythology about slavery and how did they find the magic and who did the magic originally belong to. That's just like backstory that's not necessarily seen on screen.
And for Black Americans who have been indoctrinated into this form of religion and Christianity, right, through this white lens, through this white gaze, for us to watch this requires us to tap into who we actually are, right, where we can pray to God, be baptized, and still understand that there's a spiritual realm that we can also tap into. They work congruently. This is not evil versus good. That's not satanic when you go to that other place and see your matriarchal ancestors, which is important because birth comes through women. I see what y'all did there, right? Comes through women. And that circle, the circle that with the salt and all that, they have conditioned us to believe that that's evil so that we don't tap into it. But it's the thing that got Haiti free. It's the thing that's going to get us free. And it requires for us to be open enough to understand that the first religion, the very first religion, was about ancestors. And it's not incongruent to this Christianity that we practice, as the Bible begats all the way to Jesus. Amen. It's in line. It's in line. All right. So tell us why I'm right.
I mean, it's true. Even in Igbo, cosmology, ancestors are very, very important. You're supposed to pray to your ancestors. You're supposed to greet them. You're supposed to know that they're there. They're here to guide you, which is something that Hannah was doing with Atticus, like guiding him to the finish line. And it just takes for us to just listen. Like, they're always there. They're always around us. There's the spirit realm and the physical realm is just a small veil in between. So you are right. And it is very important because everything does come through the woman. Everything starts with the woman. The Black woman created civilization. So all the DNA, everything that we have is encoded in us. And to pass that along to the next generation and to change generational curses and trauma through that, I think is very, very, very important.
So, Ihuma, there's a part of last night's episode that so much of it drove me insane, but in a delicious sort of way. In that, when Tick's ancestors said to him that she actually she thought that she was in hell based on what she had been taught, based on what the master sort of religion had taught her, but that she actually created a sanctuary for the ancestors within that fire. It wasn't that she was in hell. It was that was her rage manifest, and that your rage isn't something that you have to try to kill per se, but you pass it down as a gift and a tool. She turned the fire. She literally had the fire in her hand. That was her rage, and she gave it to him as a gift and a tool, right? Like, the mysticism that sort of walks along with religion the way we know it, we're so taught to reject the mysticism around us, right? In exchange for this very sanitized version of religion that is more about what you can't do versus what you can do, right? Can you talk a little bit about that sanctuary she created in fire? What were y'all trying to relay with that?
To piggyback off of what you were saying, you're absolutely right. We've been taught that our African traditions are evil, primitive, when actual reality, white people use what we do, and they just tell us, oh, this is evil, but they use it for their own benefit. So that's number one. And I think number two, with her creating this ancestral place, there needed to be somewhere where the spirit could rest and wait for the generation that was going to unlock them, that was going to change the path and the course of Black people in the country and in the world, actually. So when Hannah said, you're going to save them all, she's talking about all Black people, not just your family, not just your particular bloodline, but all Black people, because we're going to reverse what has happened to us. You know what I mean? So it's just a I'm just so glad people are connecting to that part of it, because I don't want that to go over people's head, how important it is of your bloodline and your ancestry and how they are supporting us. Even if we can't see them in the physical, they are still there. They can be conjured. They can guide us, you know? So I love that you're able to connect with that.
We're talking with Ihoma Ofodere. What was the conversation like in the writer's room to manifest that? We were talking earlier with a professor about the importance, we're talking about conventions in the 1800s of Black people coming together to decide our fate and future, and the importance of us banging against one another with ideas and refining ourselves. What was talk about the writer's room process to get to this story? You know, did Misha come in with everything already set, you know, and then it's like, here's your part to write, or did it evolve from episode one? Talk about that.
Misha definitely had a vision. Misha had a clear goal and idea where she wanted the season to go and the themes that we were going to cover. So she did a lot of the work. You know what I mean? Like, even down to like every episode, how she wanted it to be anthology and how she wanted it to be each singular character's own episode. And of course, you know, you bring in people to help bring your vision to light. So it was a very collaborative process, being in the writer's room. And I think what got us to the ancestral part is because we started off with Hannah whispering and guiding Atticus out of the burning lodge. That's essentially what saved him. So it was just idea to bring that full circle in the end of how she saved him in the beginning, and she's going to save him again at the end. And then paying honor and respect to those who have laid the groundwork for us that we sometimes, you know, we forget about.
Your role in the writer's room, because you said you came from assistant writer to being co-author, co-writer of last night's episode. What was that evolution for you personally? How did it happen?
Man. How did it happen? I think working on the show, it was a big growth for me personally and professionally. It challenged me to step up and to step into my power and to trust myself and trust my voice. And so it was a hard process for me to get to that point.
Specifically, was there one moment? Come on. I mean, because these are things when we step into our purpose that change the trajectory of our lives. So you had a life-changing trajectory working on this. Mm-hmm. You will never go back. Your future ahead of you in terms of writing. The world is your oyster. Something cracked. Do you remember the moment that something cracked where you were like, I can, because it's the confidence that I can do this and I'm going to contribute and I'm going to step in and I'm going to suggest. Do you remember that moment?
The moment that cracked for me was, I cannot fail. If it's coming to me, then I'm ready for it. Allow Misha to guide me and to trust her. And, you know, when someone sees your potential, even if you don't see it, you have to almost follow behind in blind faith and allow the growth process to happen. So I guess for me, was when I was given the opportunity to write my episode and actually run the room as a showrunner for 2 weeks when I was breaking my episode. Like I was forced to step into a leadership position, and I knew I could not fail. No matter how hard it was, no matter if I thought I wasn't ready, it did not matter. It was time. It was just time. There was no way to shrink back, you know, and that's why like Hippolyta's story just touched me so much because we shrink ourselves and we tell ourselves we're not ready, we can't do it, even though the opportunity is presenting itself, and the opportunity doesn't present unless you're ready for it, you know? So it was just this.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I'm done. Go.
No, so Shannon, I think, is Hippolyta. She says she's Hippolyta's baby's mama, right? That's her handle. Is she the person that brought Hippolyta? Because Hippolyta, I lied. Hippolyta is my favorite character. She and Ruby, but Hippolyta. So, but I'm struggling with one thing. She left her baby, right? She left her child, and her child was angry. You left me, and I was on Dee's side. Because that child should not have been having to deal with all of that by herself, right? And I don't know as a mother, because I'm not one, but I can't imagine leaving my child. And then as an afterthought, oh, mother. Oh, yeah, I have a child. Let me go back 200 years in this time travel thing. I was like struggling with that storyline. And what happened at the end, I felt, and I want to ask you as a writer, the very last scene that we see Dee in, was that too much for this young girl to do? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, does that change her forever in a way that's not good? Because that like tick, I think, destroys your spirit when you are confronted with life or ending life.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I always look at the younger generation as the people who is going to lead us forward. You know what I mean? And when she said that line, they never learn, that is something to the older generation who we don't get it. We still play the same thing and things never change. So it takes a radical person to invoke change. And so she was that radical person. She was that Malcolm X who was like, no, we are going to do something different.
Wow.
Harness your rage and use it as a gift and a tool, right? She may be that rage that she had, that may be what drives her to be to not apologize, to not kowtow, to not make concessions, to be that strong leader that says, no, we're not taking this shit anymore. Who knows what happens in season 2 or the Diana season or whatever, right? So I there's one thing I've got to ask you. Eloise Baptiste is her mom, right? Her mom's name. Letty's mom's name is Eloise Baptiste. The Baptiste family is the Eve's Bayou family, right? Like, I feel like last night was the first time we heard Eloise's last name, that she was a Baptiste. And there's also the reference with the sweater that Letty wears. That's the exact same sweater that Lynn Whitfield wore in Eve's Bayou, and the passing on of mysticism from one generation to another one, and all of those things. So there's a whole bunch of conspiracy theorists online that are trying to connect the dots between the eventual connection between Lovecraft and Eve's Bayou. Shut me down so I can stop this.
I just find it interesting because when we were in the writer's room, we were not like, let's connect this to Eve's Bayou. I think a lot of things happen after the fact, like with the wardrobe, production design. I think, Misha's so detailed, and those things came afterward, after the writer's room, which is incredible that you guys are able to connect all this, right?
We really smart. We some smart people, though, but we're not doing it alone. We got the ancestors here. All right. So, Ihoma, I know you have to run. Let me just thank you for last minute coming in, because this has been an incredible experience, and it has shifted my thinking on a lot of things: time travel, the ability to name yourself and walk into your purpose, which I don't know whose idea that was, but it was freeing for a lot of people. Drew, you had one more question? I know you have to. One more question from Drew, please. Go ahead, Drew.
All right. So the other one was, first of all, I wanted to really, really thank you for the whoever wrote the scene where Tick talks about sort of the humanity of grieving and loss. That scene is food for the soul for Black folks right now, I think, in this country, right? And because we've lost so much during this whole COVID thing. So whoever wrote that piece of it, that is brilliant. That is some beautiful medicine that you guys put into the tapestry of this thing. So thank you for whoever wrote that. It was beautifully done and written. A question. Is there anything we should get from the fact that Tick killing that whiteness inside of him is what freed him and the people?
Say it again.
What?
That
Wait a
whiteness
minute.
that was inside of him. How does that impact his male ancestor, his cousin's blood, like killing that inside of him and that freeing him? Like, is that part of the thing that we get from that?
I'm so sorry. You were breaking up. Killing the what inside of him?
The whiteness, that white bloodline.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's interesting. I think ultimately Atticus had to sacrifice himself for family, and family is at the core of the show. Forget about all of the magic and the sci-fi and the horror. At the core of the show is a family drama, and really facing your family abuse and trauma and generational trauma and abuse. So I think it's less about him confronting this whiteness in him, but more so confronting the issues that he had with his family and particularly with his father. And what I love is how so many people resonated with that father and son dynamic that you typically don't see on screen at all, like that real gritty, like getting to the bottom of why there's so much animosity and why there's constant generational trauma and breaking generational curses. And the only way that you can break it is by confronting it and then healing it and then changing the next generation, which I thought was so poignant when, Atticus told Montrose in his letter, like, you have a second chance with your grandson, with my son, you have a second chance. And in order for Montrose to get to that point, he had to confront parts of him that he buried, parts of him that he did not accept with his sexuality, with, the horrors of being Black in America and experiencing Tulsa. It was just full circle. And I think that was the purpose of Atticus in this story.
Drew McCaskill, I think you're right about George being the dark-skinned monster, because the white monsters, that monster saved Tick, came up from the ground, ate all of them cops, including that dirty cop, split him in half. Tick was able to put his hand on him, D was able to command this monster, was with her side by side. And somebody on Twitter said that D was the one that gave Tick the book about Lovecraft because it was a woman with a robotic arm. Hooded. Man.
Listen. So, Karen, the whole time I was watching it, I had so many, thoughts about it. Okay, I'll be honest. This was not my favorite episode. It did not wrap up the kind of way that I thought it was going to wrap. It didn't give me all the exact things that I felt like I needed, but the biblical references were super intense for me. I mean, literally, Tick was on a
cross.
Version of a cross, right? Almost like the African, the African arm.
Yes.
Where the circular head at the top, the arms stretched wide, and then the body down, and he literally hung his head and died for the survival of his family, right? There were so many references that were there, right? That I was like, yo, this biblical references is there. The thing about the sanctuary and the fire, though, I still need to unpack that. I'm still figuring that out. I love the fact that Hannah says, I thought this because of what I had been indoctrinated and told. I thought I was in hell, right? Because that's what. Even when I was watching it, there was a couple of times during Lovecraft where I was like, I can't be watching this demonic shit. You know what I mean? Out of sheer, Christian indoctrination of how Black folks will say to you, all of that is dabbling
witchcraft.
In the occult.
Right.
Exactly. But I think about, too, that mysticism is part and parcel to so much of religion, right? We just had so much of our contributions to it whitewashed away.
I mean, but listen, people are literally, this is the blood of Christ. They're drinking his blood at communion and eating his body. It's all in plain sight. And I feel like, and I've been doing this on purpose. The very first conversation you and I had for my podcast was about your coming out. But there was also this thing about religion. I had this conversation with Larry, and my goal was to have this conversation with Black people in particular, because we need to be free from the bounds of this present version of quote unquote religion and walk into the larger, freer version of spirituality that freed those folk in Haiti, that got people through 400 years of bondage to be great. And it's in us. And we speak things into creation. We talk these things all the time, but yet we don't rely on them because we've been taught that's devil worship. That's the occult. But like she said, like what happened in Lovecraft, they use our magic and then tell us it's evil. They use it for evil because it's all agnostic, right? There's no real good and evil. It's good and evil people. It's what you do with the tools. It's in nature. Medicine can be poison in dosages, right? That same thing, if taken in a higher dose, can kill you. It can cure you or kill you. And I think it's the same thing with spirituality. And if we could think about it that way, my words, life and death is in the power of the tongue. Life and death. I can kill you with my mouth. I can heal you with my mouth. If we start to think about that, but the larger thing for me, and I don't want to give away too many things because people still haven't watched it and it's hard to explain, but the idea of community, larger community, to save everybody. And in our art, we often see the Black person as the sacrificial lamb. It's usually a Black woman, a Black man, they're always sacrificing for the good of everybody, right? That's ingrained in us. But Tick didn't die. Tick didn't die. He was able to go back because time is not what we think it is. So he got to meet his son, got his book, came back, gave it to his father. So he knew that his death was not the end, because matter cannot be created nor destroyed. Like if we thought about our life as not an end, and what she was chasing, Christina, was everlasting life, without family, without connection, without community. You can never live forever if you don't have those things. But yet that is what people chase. The fountain of youth, when I say people, so-called white people, they're chasing this thing, this everlasting life, this immortality, and they'll do anything for it except community, love, build, grow, your legacy, which is the only place you're going to get that eternal life that you're seeking. And they don't even know it. So what she was basking in his blood, in her cousin's blood, was the thing that ended her, because you can't get eternal life except through us. No one comes through the Father except through what? The Son, right? There's all of these messages already written in these books that we read and we quote, but we don't connect the dots because we've been trained and conditioned not to. So I want to thank Lovecraft just for the conversation around this.
Absolutely. I mentioned that part about what Tick is saying to Jinya about her grieving process, that love isn't separated from her just because those people die. Is that you don't have that feeling of connection, because that's what grief is. What you do with that grief, what you do with your life, what you do with your power, you have the option to use that for good or for bad, right? Is that you still have agency. Just because of what you feel like that your nature is one thing, or what the expectation of you is for your nature is, he's saying that all these things happen to us, but how we view them and our place in the world, we still have some agency in that. And that part of it, I think, is the universal piece of it, that you still choose whether or not to use your powers for good or evil.
There's a scripture that I carried through most of my 20s because I had a really bad temper, like breaking phones, throwing at, like bad temper. And I remember I was doing Bible study with Joyce Shelby at the Daily News, and she read me the scripture, be angry, but sin not. And when I was thinking about that fire, that rage that they were in, your rage can be turned into a tool, can be turned into a weapon. You can be angry and you could be enraged and control it and use it for something, because that's energy, which goes back to Christina talking about casting spells. You need intention, you need energy, you need a body, you need words, you need all of that. But it comes back to what you're talking about: control, discipline. And many of us, we let life happen to us, and we think that life is a series of things that happen to us, and I've said this before, it rains on all of us, but how you handle the rain will determine the outcome, right? And I think a lot of us become victims in our own stories because things are happening. People die, you have a bad experience, you lose a job, and then you fall into this, oh, they did this to me. Just the notion that you could be looking at somebody's life and be so envious that you're going to burn it to the ground because you're not living your best life. But burning that to the ground still doesn't give you the best life. Even if you pillage and rape and you take everything, you didn't build that. So it's not going to have the same feeling. When I was a little kid, I would take things. It wasn't the same as working for them as an adult. You have so much more of a greater appreciation for working for something that you really cared about than taking it. And I don't know how folk live, who are thieves and culture vultures and, who have made fortunes off of other people's work and energy. But that seems to be as American as apple pie. But that reign is coming to an end. 866-801-8255. Hey, Drew.
Hey, Karen. I love the Lovecraft conversations, not just because we get to talk about like a show, that this shared thing, because there's so few things we get to share right now during COVID, and I love that like people on Twitter like, ask about this, ask about that, because we have this shared experience of what we view together. But the deeper level of conversation about living life more abundantly that comes out of these conversations that we have about art and Black art is amazing to me. There was a piece in episode last night on Lovecraft where Hippolyta is talking to Dee, and she shows Dee the comic book, and Dee says, I'm never going to be able to draw like this. And Hippolyta says to her, yes, you will, because an artist named Ufua showed me, and I'm going to show you. And Ufua Richardson is a Black illustrator, a Black comic book illustrator, right? And just here's what.
Wait, and guess who's gonna be on the show tomorrow?
Don't Word. I love you, Karen Hunter. I love the Karen Hunter show. I love this, right?
And that's because of you. And that's because of you, Drew. That's because of you. Wait, she's going to be on the show tomorrow because you tweeted her out. And then I reached out. And she was going to be on today. But, scheduling or whatever. So she'll be on tomorrow. But you tweeted her out. And this is what I'm saying. Like, everything's collective. We don't live here by ourselves. We're not islands. Nobody is a star. We are all part of a greater family that allows all of this to be great. And, if you didn't tweet her out today, I wouldn't have reached out because I wouldn't have known that was a real person. So I thank you for doing that. So you don't even know that. Just that simple act.
I didn't know that, but I'm like stoked about it because when we tell our own stories, when we're the boss, and this is something that I know is true for us as a community, but I've seen it so many times with Black women in particular. And I love the brothers. I came for the brothers as well. But when Black women are in charge, I've seen it over and over again that they put other Black people on, that they make sure that the ecosystem is Black too. So you got like these Black storytellers that are saying, well, we need a Black illustrator for this, or we need to reference Black music, and let's reference these nuances that happen in the story of Black music. That this was a song that was a Black artist, but then the mainstream version was a ripoff of that song with a Black artist, right? Like when we tell our own stories, we get the opportunity to fill the ecosystem with more Black writers, more Black illustrators, that these Black storytellers put all these other Black creatives on so that we all come along for the ride together. And then that Black illustrator, God willing, will put somebody else Black on when they get that opportunity next to be the person who gets to be the decision maker. And the ecosystem gets bigger and bigger and blacker.
And let's, at some point, and I've been inching up on this conversation for the last 6 years, the role of black women in the freedom of black people is instrumental. We have been fed another lie, about who's at the head. And there's no head, because that's a white ideology. There's no leader. We lead together. But everything birthed comes through black women. And if we don't have that kind, it's not in disrespect of black men. But if we don't understand the natural order of things, we will forever be in this cycle of disorder and dis-ease, because it has not been happening that way. Even this Ice Cube conversation is rooted in this notion that somehow this man that's never given birth to anything physically could birth a movement around ideas to help all of black America with no black women at the table. That in and of itself made it illegitimate. And it's not something I'm talking about because then it becomes this toxic thing, blah, blah, blah. It's not about that. We've been out of order following somebody else's rubric and blueprint for leadership that was always designed for us to be at the bottom of the food chain. So that should already be a natural rejection. We're not doing anything the way they do it, because the way they do it requires that I'm at their foot. It's time for us to reimagine what this world is going to look like, made in our image. And it's going to come through a black woman, because we give birth to everything.